Hello everyone, and welcome to Psycho 104, Basic Psychological Processes. I'm your instructor, Dr. Kimberly Campbell, and today's video is meant to be a stand-in for our standard first lecture of class. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, who I am, and why I'm teaching this class. Then we're going to move on and go through some of the highlights of our syllabus, just to give you an idea of what to expect in this course in terms of formatting and such, so that you know what to expect for the rest of the semester. But now that I've established myself as a real, living, breathing human being, and not just some disembodied voice talking over a PowerPoint, let's hop on over to those PowerPoints. And as promised, the first part of this video is going to be all about getting to know me as your instructor. So, like I said, I am Dr. Kimberly Campbell. You can call me Dr. Campbell, or I'm okay with just Kimberly. I'm fairly new to having that degree, so I'm not super attached to the title as of yet. Before I launch into my academic background, I always like to explain why I cover this. When you're learning about science and when you're going through these courses, we always try and stress that it's important to be critical of your sources. Where's this information coming from? And I am, even as an instructor, then a source. So who am I to sit here and tell you about all of these science things? So when I'm giving you my academic background, I'm not just showing off my list of degrees. I'm actually telling you why I'm a credible reference, why I'm a credible source to be sharing this information with you, even if most of it is coming from a textbook. So with that little caveat out of the way, the basic summary of my academic background is that I got my Bachelor of Science from Dalhousie University. That's in Halifax, Nova Scotia, for those not familiar with the institution. I did that back in 2013, and it's interesting to note that my BSc actually wasn't in psychology. I started off in physics, realized I was not fantastic at mathematics, and swapped over to bio. So I'm actually a bio major. And I'll talk about some of the research I've done in that biology field in just a moment here. But continuing with academics, I got my Master's of Science here at the University of Alberta in 2015. I did that with the Songbird Neuroethology Lab on campus. So if you're familiar with Dr. Sturdy in the department, I worked with him for my master's, and I continued on to get my Doctor of Philosophy, my PhD, still at the University of Alberta. So I got that in 2019. So like I said, fairly recently. Now, a new addition that I've been including with this whole switch to online thing is a little bit about me as a person. I find it's a little bit challenging, I guess, to get a feel for people when we're doing this online thing. It is, as I said, very easy for me to come across as just this disembodied voice that you hear. But I am, in fact, a person. So a little bit about me outside of academia. I am an avid bird lover. I have 2 pet birds. I have studied birds. I love birds. So I try to keep the bird examples to a minimum, but they will pop up fairly often as I teach. I am a chocolate fanatic. That is one of my favorite things to eat, even if it isn't very healthy. I like to think of myself as an amateur photographer, sort of an easier way to have an artistic output. I used to do drawing and painting, but that takes up far more time than I can afford, especially when I was a grad student. I have been obsessed with the Pokemon games since I was younger, and I continue to play those to this day. And finally, I am a collector of hobbies. So whenever I have free time, I like to pick up random hobbies. So I sew, I knit, I crochet, I cross-stitch. I've tried sculpture, all sorts of different things. I like to try different activities and see what I enjoy. So that's me outside of academia. Again, just to give you a feel for who it is that you're listening to. But hopping back to some of the more, I guess, relevant information, as promised, I'm going to give you a bit of my research background. So, like I said, when I was an undergraduate, I was in biology, and I was focusing a lot on genetics and evolution. So my research as an honors student in an undergraduate lab I ended up doing a lot of sequencing of DNA, and I was trying to identify different species of single-celled organisms in soil samples, which is just as exciting as it sounds. So I'm very familiar with things like PCR and designing primers and evaluating the outcomes of gels that you've run your PCR on and all of that thrilling stuff if you've ever taken a molecular bio course. From there, I actually turned in a pretty abrupt different direction and switched over to psychology. Again, because of my love of birds. So I ended up studying learning and communication in black-capped chickadees. So I've done things like operant conditioning experiments to figure out what chickadees think of different sounds. How do they categorize sounds? I've done bioacoustic investigations of their vocalizations, so seeing how different types of vocalizations differ structurally, and stuff like that. So some of my expertise will kind of shine throughout this course because there's quite a bit of overlap with different topics in the class and stuff that I've actually done hands-on, which is kind of cool and hopefully helpful for you guys as well. And one more picture of birds. Another thing I've included with this switch to online learning is, as I mentioned, I have 2 pet birds. I lovingly call them my research assistants. I have Link on the left and Chic on the right, green cheek conure and sun conure, respectively. And this isn't just an excuse to share cute bird photos, though we can always use more cute bird photos. I just want to give everyone a heads up that I have these guys and I work from home, so sometimes they will make appearances in the videos despite my best efforts. So if you hear stuff in the background, sometimes it's these guys. I just like to let people know in case you're wondering, what the heck is that weird sound? It's usually birds. So it's just one of the limitations or maybe bonuses of working from home. The last thing I want to touch on in this talking about myself section is my teaching philosophy. I find that it helps students to know where I'm coming from and what my ideas are when it comes to teaching, especially with online learning, so that you know what I'm looking for and what I'm expecting and kind of why. So I like to always acknowledge that online learning is new and different. We've been at this for just over a year now, so maybe people are getting used to it. Maybe it's not as challenging as it has been, but it's still a strange setup and it's not something that everyone is used to. So be aware that there will be a learning curve. And I've tried to adjust the content for my courses accordingly. I like to diversify my content. I don't just have midterms and final exams. I also include things like written assignments and chapter quizzes and other ways that you can get marks, which we'll talk about in the next section where we get into the specifics about this course. You may have already noticed that my slides are very plain, is I guess a nice way to say it. And that's because I think that material should be accessible. I've had students in the past who maybe have color blindness, and by having plain black and white slides and by making sure that any of the important graphics that we're talking about are colorblind friendly, I make sure that everyone is able to use the materials to the fullest extent. It's surprising how many things come from textbook publishers that aren't quite accessible to everyone. So as much as it does look plain and boring potentially to have just plain black and white slides, that's why I do it. And to segue on that idea of accessibility, my final teaching philosophy point is to make use of the resources that are accessible to you, that are available to you. I hold weekly office hours on Zoom, which, again, we'll talk about in just a little bit. I include videos of all of our lectures, and I like to include extra links to give some extra information or sort of additional perspectives on topics if I think that it's something that people might be struggling with. So take a look at some of those, watch through them, see if they help out with understanding of some of our more complex topics. And the final point here is to make use of resources like myself and our TA. So send me an email, come to office hours and ask questions, or make use of the general forum that we have on eClass to ask questions of myself and others in the class. And on that note, let's move into the course description proper. So the next couple of slides are mostly just subsets of information coming directly from our syllabus or from our e-class, or both. There's going to be a lot of redundant information, so if you've already read through the syllabus, then maybe you already know this stuff. But I do find that sometimes it helps to just have your instructor go through the information with you and maybe give you a little bit more insight into what the words on the page are specifically saying. So with that, let's talk about e-class. So you have possibly been using e-class already, but e-class is going to be our main source of information for the course. It is the course website. It is the central location where you're going to find pretty much all of the information you need for this class. So there's going to be general information, including this video, the syllabus, all of our announcements, frequently asked questions and things are going to end up in our general forum. I'm also going to include resources for course assessments, including our assignment, our exams, midterms, whatever. All of that is going to be on e-class. So our links to the examinations, our links to lecture videos, and to the slides, basically everything, you can find it on e-class. Before I move too much further, I do want to touch very briefly on our email policy. So I've mentioned about a general forum. I'm going to talk about personal inquiries first, and then we'll touch on that general forum that I've already mentioned. But for personal inquiries, please make sure that you email me directly. So my email address is in our syllabus and on our e-class. So just make sure you include the course code in the subject line. I am teaching multiple classes, so it really helps me to know what you're asking about if you can include what class you're from. Otherwise, it gets kind of mixed up. So include that course code in the subject line. I'm going to respond to emails as soon as possible, generally within 1 to 2 business days between Monday and Friday. I just put this here because while I do monitor my emails for things like emergencies, I'm not constantly on my email. I'm not constantly watching it. So I'm not going to immediately respond to every inquiry. But when I'm talking about personal inquiries, so direct emails like this should be things like if you have to miss an assignment or an exam or something for personal reasons, or if you're ill or something like that. So you can contact me directly for something that applies only to you. For other things, we would call those general inquiries. So these are questions about the course and the course content. For those, I'm going to direct everyone to our general forum on eClass because I find that a lot of students tend to have the same kinds of questions. So if you check the general forum, you can see if somebody else has already asked that question and maybe an answer has already been posted. If there hasn't been a question that you want to ask already asked, you can make a new post with that question, and then either myself or the TA can answer that question on that site so that everybody can see the answer. And that way, if multiple people have the same questions, then everybody gets to see them all in one place. I find that cuts down on the number of emails that we have to handle, which means that you guys get a much faster response for emergencies and important personal things, as well as you guys can help each other out on the forum, or our TA or myself. We can get on stuff pretty quickly there as well. I find that's the best course of action. Our next topic is our lectures, and you might have already picked this up from me talking about posting links to lectures, but our lectures are going to be delivered asynchronously, which means that I record them in advance and then I post them on eClass. I'll actually post links to them on eClass. Everything's going to go through YouTube, and then you can just watch those at your leisure. If you want, you can watch them during our normally scheduled class time just so that you keep up on timing, but you don't have to. I find that some students appreciate the flexibility to be able to watch them whenever, wherever, so that's why I do it this way. Another benefit of having these lectures being posted on YouTube means that you can watch them at a faster rate or a slower rate. You can speed up or slow down the playback. You can also turn on subtitles if you desire. I think I already mentioned this, but I'm going to be posting the slides on eClass as well, and I find that students prefer to have them as either PowerPoint or PDF files, so I include both of those for you guys to look at. I also mentioned that I have live meetings once a week. So on Mondays at 9 a.m., I hold optional Zoom meetings. So these aren't something that you need to attend, they're just there as an extra resource if you'd like to use it. So this gives students an opportunity to show up, ask questions, discuss course topics, or just chat about science in general. The way that I do this is I put a link to our class Zoom on eClass. There's a section called Live Meetings that'll bring you right to it. As I said, attendance is not mandatory, and I run these meetings for at least 15 minutes. Basically, I block out our full class period, so 70 minutes, and I will stick around for at least 15 minutes of those. If nobody comes, or if we're done chatting after 15 minutes, then we'll end the call there and we'll start again next week. But if I've seen it before where a lot of people show up, there's a lot of questions, or maybe we get a really good discussion going, I've had these meetings go on for as long as an hour. So I just set a 15-minute minimum so I don't have to sit around for an hour if nobody's there to ask any questions, but I will stick around for much longer if people have questions and want to continue the discussion. So that's how I run the live section of the course. And I just find that it gives people a chance to interact with both myself and other students in the class, which is a nice break with this online delivery. The next slide includes the course description, and this is copied directly from our syllabus, which is copied directly from the course calendar, so you've probably already seen this already. What I'd much rather focus on is actually our course goals, so the knowledge and understanding that I'm hoping that you're going to obtain after working through this class. So the goal here is that this course will provide a base understanding of scientific methods, learning, memory, consciousness, perception, and neuroscience. Our goal here is to develop critical thinking skills, to become familiar with the main foundations of modern psychology, and to acquire an overview of the field of psychology as a whole. Basically, this class is meant to give you a broad exposure to what psychology is and some of the basics of how it works. You're going to find that each chapter differs wildly from all of the chapters previously because we start talking about lots of varied topics. And as you move on, if you choose to stick with psychology, you can take entire classes on each individual chapter. You can take entire classes on subsections of each individual chapter. So, as an introductory psychology course, this is meant to give you an introduction to psychology. So just keep that in mind when we are touching on many and varied topics throughout the semester. Just a quick touching again on our textbook. This is from our syllabus directly. This is the citation for our textbook. This is what the cover looks like. You might have an older version of this textbook. This is just the copy that I have. This is the 7th Canadian edition. And as we'll see on the next slide, when we get into our outline of topics, this course actually covers a strange subset of chapters. So this is our lecture schedule. So this is our rough idea of what we're covering and when. And you'll notice that we cover chapters 1 through 8, and then we cover chapter 11. Now this isn't because you just won't ever learn about chapters 9 and 10. This is actually because chapters 9 and 10 fall under Psycho 105, so the arts half of intro psychology. So for whatever reason, the order of the chapters is just a little bit strange. So we jump straight from 8 to 11 at the end of the semester. So I just draw everyone's attention to that so you're not scrambled and looking for chapters 9 and 10 later on. They're not covered in this course. Now, before I move on from this outline of topics, I would say that in the first couple of days of this class, it would be a great idea to go through your syllabus, look at things like this table, and start pulling out some of these important dates, like the date of our midterms, the date of our assignments, and things like that, just so that you know when things are going to be due. You can also take a quick look at our grade evaluation for this course. These are the different components that are going to make up your final grade for this class. We're going to talk about each component individually, but just as a quick look here, we have 2 midterms. We're going to have a written assignment. We're going to have a bunch of chapter quizzes. You have research participation and a final exam. I'm going to talk about all of these components except for research participation. And that's because research participation is conducted centrally by the department. So if you go to our eClass page and scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's actually a whole section on research participation. And I believe our research coordinator is going to be posting a video of her own explaining how research participation works. So I would recommend taking a look at that section on eClass, watching any of the videos, reading all the documentation there. And that may take a little while to appear. Research participation doesn't start right off the bat. It waits until after the ad drop date has passed. So probably next week you can start looking for that. All right, so step 1 is to talk about our written assignment. So this assignment is all about critically evaluating a media article. And in the syllabus, I had actually noted that I would post this after our first midterm, but because spring courses move so quickly, I've made the description for this assignment visible already. So from the first day of class, you can actually get started on this assignment if you so all of the information will be there, and I'll post another one of these videos going over the specifics of that assignment, and I'll link all of that in the same place, just so you have all of the resources in one place. And for your reference, the due date for that assignment is Monday, June 7th, and everything is due by 11:59 p.m. MST, so that's Edmonton time. For our chapter quizzes, we're going to have 9 quizzes total, and they're going to be worth 15% overall of your final grade. So these are going to be released approximately concurrently with lectures. So if the first week of class we're covering chapter 1, in that first week you're also going to see the quiz for chapter 1. I might post quizzes earlier if I get them finished earlier, but at the very latest, you'll see them posted on eClass at about the same time that we're covering that material in our schedule. Now, these chapter quizzes are going to consist of multiple choice questions, and you're going to, as I say, do them on eClass. They're not timed, so I don't have a timer on these, and you can open them up as many times as you want, as long as you don't submit them. So if you wanted, you could start the chapter 1 quiz, take a look at all of the questions, and then answer those questions as you work through all of the videos that go along with chapter 1, or as you read through chapter 1 in the textbook. There's no time limit, there's no anything like that, so you can leave those open as long as you need to. The only limit here is that all open quizzes will then submit by midnight or 11:59 on the day of the midterm that tests those chapters. What that means basically is that you get to work on those chapters until the day that we have the midterm that's testing the chapters. So midterm 1 covers chapters 1, 2, and 3, which means that you can work on the quizzes for chapters 1, 2, and 3 any time before midnight on May 21st, which is our midterm 1 date. You can, of course, submit these much earlier if you want. There's no need to do them at any particular time, just as long as they're done before that cutoff point. And similarly then for midterm 2, which is going to cover chapters 4, 5, and 6. Those are all due June 11th. And then 7, 8, and 11 are due on the last day of course. So not on the date of the final exam, but on the last day of class, which is June 23rd. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because we have a tentative final exam date, but we don't have a finalized final exam date. And I had to put a date in the syllabus so that you have access to it. So those are going to be due on our last day of class, which is June 23rd. All right, next is our midterm exams. So we have 2 midterms, as I kind of just hinted at. The first one covers chapters 1 to 3. The second one covers chapters 4 to 6. And that's all listed in the syllabus. And I'll put it in the description of those midterms up on eClass as well. So there's lots of places you can find that info. The midterms are not cumulative, which means that the first midterm covers 3 chapters, and then you won't be tested again on that material on the second midterm. The second midterm will just be new material that you've learned since the first midterm. The midterms consist of short answer and multiple choice questions. I tend to have just a handful of short answer questions where I'll expect you to give a 1 or 2 sentence response to a question that basically tests your understanding of some of the concepts that we've covered. Our midterms are open book and written on eClass, which means that you can use your lecture notes, you can use Google, you can use whatever you need to use in order to finish the exam. Just be aware of the time limit because you don't have time to look up every single question. So be smart about how you organize your notes and on how you study. And so again, our midterm dates, midterm 1 is May 21st, midterm 2 is June 11th, and these midterms occur during our normally scheduled class periods. So both are on Fridays, and our class goes from 9 until, oops, I just caught a mistake. Our class goes from 9 until 10 a.m. So through the magic of video editing, you can now see that it says 10:10 instead of just 10 o'clock. The slides that you'll be able to access on eClass will have the correct time here. But that means that you get 70 minutes to complete the exam. And as I said, it'll be open book, all found on eClass. So it's going to be the same basic setup as our chapter quizzes. So you'll already be old hat at going through our eClass quizzes before you get to the exams. Our final exam is basically going to be a longer version of our midterms. The only difference here is that the final exam is cumulative, which means that you can be tested on any material that you've learned throughout the semester, but there tends to be quite a bit more weight on untested material. So our final exam is usually set up so that about 70% of the questions are on everything that you've learned after midterm 2, and the remaining 30% comes from the first 6 chapters, which you would have been tested on midterms 1 and 2. The final exam questions are also going to be short answer and multiple choice, same basic setup as the midterm. Just like I said, it's a longer exam. It's going to be a 2-hour exam, still open book, still written on eClass. And I mentioned that we have a tentative exam date, so it looks like it's going to be Thursday, June 24th at 11:30 a.m., but make sure that you keep an eye on that date in Bear Tracks. That's going to be updated as our registrar's office decides what the final schedule is for exams, and when they've decided, it'll show up on Bear Tracks as a confirmed final date. Right now, it's just listed as a tentative date, so you can put that into your schedule, but put a little asterisk with it to make sure that you check if they're going to change that as the semester goes on. I'll also announce the date once they finalize it, but they don't necessarily tell me that they've finalized it, so we'll figure it out as the semester goes on. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about in our slides is what to do if you have to miss a midterm or a quiz or an assignment, and I'll touch also on what happens if you have to miss a final exam as well. So this is, again, directly from our syllabus, but if you can't write a midterm exam or complete one of our assignments or assessments due to some severe illness or domestic affliction or some other compelling reason, you can contact me, your instructor, and you can request a deferral of the weight of the missed midterm to the final exam, or you can request an extension of a due date for something like the quizzes or the assignment. That way I don't actually do rewrites of midterms. I just shift the weight to the final exam because I find with larger classes it's really hard to schedule a whole bunch of rewrites. It's just we'll move it to the final exam, and the final exam tests everything you've learned throughout the semester, so it covers all that knowledge anyways. In order to do this, you have to contact me within 24 hours of the missed deadline so that I can deal with it in a timely manner. And for all cases, I may request adequate documentation to substantiate the reason for your absence, if I deem that necessary. Final exams are a little bit different, and I just want to go over this because most students don't realize that final exams aren't the same as midterms, and that's because final exams have to go through your faculty. So if you are a student as part of the Faculty of Science, then you have to contact the Faculty of Science about missing a final exam. If you're a student from the Faculty of Arts, then you contact the Faculty of Arts. If you're an open studies student, then you contact the registrar's office directly. And that's just because us instructors aren't allowed to handle missed final exams. We can only deal with during the term stuff. So if you have to miss a final exam for one of these reasons listed here, then you have to contact them to get approval to write the deferred exam. All right, that is a ton of information, but hopefully that gives you sort of a Cole's Notes version of our syllabus. Make sure that you flip through the document and familiarize yourself with all of our due dates and things like that. And then you are welcome to start looking through our video lectures and our slides on eClass. And if you decide to come to our live Zoom classes, then I will see you at one of those on a Monday coming up.